My name is Jenna Matzer, and I'm conducting this interview on behalf of Unity Hospice. We're sitting here today with Charles Schwarz of South Elgin, Illinois. The date is Thursday, October 1st, 2015, and the purpose of this interview is to record the military story of Mr. Schwarz and send it to the Library of Congress for inclusion in the Veterans History Project. Can you state your full name?
My name is Charles L. Schwarz, Jr.,
Date of birth?
July 27th, 1934, in Evanston, Illinois, St. Francis Hospital,
Branch of service?
the U.S. Navy.
Okay. And what's the highest rank attained?
Commander.
And during what war or conflict did you serve?
I was between the Korean War and the Vietnam War, so I did not see any combat at all.
So you said you were born in Evanston, Illinois.
Yes.
Who were your parents and what were their occupations?
My father was Charles L. Sr. He was an Evanston police officer, and my mother was a housewife.
Did you have any siblings?
A brother and three sisters. My brother Robert was in the Army, and then my sisters Mary, Ruth, and Jean.
Okay. Were any of them military?
No, no ma'am.
What were you doing before you entered the service?
Well, I was going to school, and I was going to Kenyon College in Gambier, Ohio. Graduated with a BS degree in biology.
And so how old were you? Were you enlisted? Because it
I
wasn't
did.
during the war. How old were you when you enlisted?
I was, let's see, not quite 22.
Okay. All right. Why did you choose the Navy over any other military
Well,
branch?
after I heard about the aviation officer candidate program that the Navy had started up. I think it was for about a year. But anyhow, I was very interested in that. So after I graduated with my degree, I applied for and was selected for the aviation officer candidate program, which meant going through 16 weeks of pre-flight training and then basic training, and then if you made it, on to advanced training, after which time you would get your wings and be assigned to a squadron.
Okay. What went through the application process when you applied for that program?
Well, lots of physicals for one thing. Some testing in terms of my spatial ability to handle flight type of situations. I don't remember much of anything else. And then there was like a background check that took about 6 months.
Okay.
So.
What happened when you first departed for training camp and during your early days of training?
Well, I reported on February, I think it was 24th of 1957 for my 16 weeks of flight training, pre-flight training. I remember that it took me a while to get done. The Navy had made reservations for me to fly down to Pensacola, Florida. I got down to Birmingham, Alabama, and then the next flight that I was supposed to catch was booked. I couldn't get on board, so I was supposed to report by noon that Sunday. I didn't get in until 3 o'clock in the morning. I wound up taking a bus. Anyhow, at 3 o'clock in the morning, I crawled into the sack with 7 other guys, or 6, maybe 4 other guys. And at 5 o'clock, I was roused to do calisthenics. And our first thing I did was go down with 38 other guys in our section to go do calisthenics between 2 hangars alongside Pensacola Bay. And I was soaking wet because it was also raining that night, so I was in wet clothes on top of it. So,
Do you recall any of your instructors?
our drill, we had a master Marine drill sergeant. His name was Sergeant Sweeten, and he was anything but sweet. But he was very tough and demanding, but a fair guy. And he was our instructor through the entire 16 weeks. He told us when to go, when to do it, and how to do it, you know. for 16 weeks.
So other than that, the aviation school, did you receive any other specialized training?
Well, there were lots of training for, as far as the pre-flight program is concerned. We learned navigation, engines, meteorology, principles of flight, military training. So that was all part of our 16 weeks. So those were specialized training in terms of getting us prepared to actually start flight school after we graduated. So when I graduated in June of 14th of 1957, I graduated as an ensign.
How did you adapt to military life, including physical regimen, barracks, food, and social life?
Reasonably well, I thought. The first week was very hectic. We were marched all over the place to get uniforms and physicals and testing for whatever reason, but that first week was very hectic. We were housed in what was called the Indoctrination Battalion, and that was our home for 16 weeks, but we didn't have a whole lot of time to do a lot of stuff. Otherwise, we had some weekends free, but we had to stay on base. So we were going to a cadet club there on base for relaxation, but it was pretty limited for 16 weeks. But all in all, I thought I did pretty well.
Mm-hmm. What was the food like?
Food was excellent.
Was it?
Yeah. We didn't have much time to eat it, but it was very good.
So where did you serve? Did you mainly stateside? Did you serve internationally?
Let's see. I was in the got into the basic training program. I received my commission, went into the basic training program. I did not get my landings were kind of controlled crashes. They were kind of questionable all my entire career. And I did not get my wings, and I didn't finish basic training. I wound up what the carrier qualification squadron in Pensacola, and that was the last phase of basic training, and I was the logs officer there. I left the Navy in active duty in 1960. And joined the Air Reserves, the Naval Air Reserves out of NAS Glenview. And there I served as an ordnance officer for DA 725, the Tech Squadron 725, and then became the maintenance officer, the aircraft maintenance officer for that group, and was that until the point where I did make commander, and then I was given other duties, and basically served briefly on the Chief of Naval Air Training staff there at Glenview.
What are some memories you have of the different places that you served?
Well, not that many. We did go to our attack squadron from Glenview. Went down to Rosie Roads, Puerto Rico, Guantanamo Bay, Cuba several times. Here in the States, we went to Yuma, Arizona a few times. I guess I can say the one thing that stands out when we went down to Guantanamo Bay for our active duty for training, Fidel Castro had already taken over the country, and in the mountains outside of Guantanamo Bay, you could see the fires that the guerrillas built to keep an eye on what was going on our base. And I remember waking up about 3 o'clock in the morning. I heard this tremendous noise. And what it was that the Marine detachment there, who was responsible for security, was doing maneuvers, and the trucks and the jeeps and everybody was marching up to the perimeter to let them know that we were alert and on guard. And then I know that we also had 2 F-8 Crusaders with their own crew, their own ground support equipment that were at the ready. So if anything Fidel tried to do, he was going to get a quick answer very quickly. You know, so I remember that part of.
What kind of friendships and camaraderie did you form while serving?
Well, I met two wonderful friends while I was in service, and at Pensacola. Joseph Thomas McDermott and Michael George Hoff. They became very, very good friends. And I'll get to the story about this, but anyhow, my wife, we were married. My wife and I were in Pensacola. We had a little boy, but these two guys, our house was their house. They used it whenever they needed to at 3 o'clock in the morning on Saturday afternoon or Saturday night. They needed to have a place to stay. They came plop down in our house. I played 12-inch fast pitch softball with Michael Hoff. They were just great friends, and I couldn't have asked for greater friends. While I did not get far enough to get my wings, Joe and Michael went on to advanced training, got their wings, and they were called plowbacks. They were plowed back to the training command in order to train new pilots. So they came back to Pensacola after they'd gone out to Corpus Christi and some other places. But they came back to Pensacola, which they were good friends, so we were away for a little while, and then we were able to renew our friendship again. Mm-hmm. Excuse me. After they left Pensacola, Mike was transferred to the West Coast to a squadron out for about 10 years out in that area. And Joe was transferred, was pretty much squadron on the East Coast, including a exchange duty with the RAF in Scotland. About 10 years after they left, they were reunited in a squadron called VA-86 out of Jacksonville, Florida. So after 10 years, they were back together again, if you will. And of course, we have maintained contact. I have maintained with them all that time. And Joe and Mike were trained to fly this new A-7 Corsair II, and that squadron, VA-86, was going to be put onto the Coral Sea. The Coral Sea CBA-43 went into the South China Sea in early, or maybe it was even before late December. I know that Michael had a boy, whose name was Joe, was the 5th child that he had, was just 2 or 3 months old when he left to go out to sea. Anyhow, while they're on the Coral Sea, Joe was leading, Mike was flying wing, and they took off and went to they were vectored into a station by a spotter plane, and this plane spotted a truck deployment dump in Laos. This was before the government even announced that we were fighting in Laos. But anyhow, Joe and were part of a squadron that 4 or 5 planes that went to this. They were vectored into this area. Joe and Mike were the first ones in. They pulled out at around 3,000 feet, but Mike got hit by fire, and his plane crashed. There was at 8,000 feet there was it was called the perch. There were other planes waiting to make their run at 8,000 feet, and one of them saw what was an ejection seat going out from Mike's plane, but it was inverted. Mike's plane was inverted when it crashed. So they didn't know really what happened to him. The long story short is, I'm trying to make this short.
Take as long as you want with these stories.
That was January 7th, 1970. On January 8th, I got a call from the wife of Joe McDermott saying that Mike had crashed. Mike was married to a gal named Mary Helen Perrault. Her name was then Mary Helen Hoff, and they had 5 children, and the youngest of which was just born a few months before Mike left. But anyhow, after some time for grieving and everything that she did, she felt that something was necessary, some kind of an emblem was necessary to remember the POWs and the MIA, because Mike was considered MIA at that point. He was not considered killed in action, but he was MIA. But Mary Helen decided that she needed to do something to help bring some kind of something that could be honored in terms of the POWs and the MIAs. She actually created the POW MIA flag. She contacted a vice president of the American Flag Company, and between the two of them, they created what we now see as the POW MIA flag. And the silhouette that's on that flag is the silhouette of Mike Hoff. I see it every day. And that flag is the second most recognizable flag, as far as I know, in the United States and elsewhere, I guess. But every time I see him, I know that he's the guy behind. So that she presented the first flag to the commander of the Jacksonville Naval Air Station, and then from there it just grew from there. But she's the one that's responsible for helping to create that flag.
Wow, wow. Do you still keep in touch?
Yes, Mary Helen is still alive. She's got Parkinson's disease. She had 5 children, all have done well. Michael, Robert, Susan, Charlie, and Joseph. They've all done well. The Navy paid for their education.
Wow.
And I think Robert still lives with her in her home. And the other 4 are married and have children. So I haven't actually spoken with her in the last year or so, but up until that time we've had letters and some phone calls with them.
What about Joseph? Is he
Joe McDermott. He wound up marrying a gal from Manitowoc, Wisconsin. They had 3 children, Kelly, Patrick, and Michael. And Inez he married a gal named Inez. I can't think of Inez's last name. But after he got out of service, 22 years in, then he joined a company up in Manitowoc. It's actually called the Manitowoc Corporation. They sold big cranes. And he was kind of like a customer service kind of guy, But he passed away in January of 1999, or in May of 1999, in June of 1999. I was asked to accompany his body he was from Boston, Massachusetts. Actually lived in Brighton, Massachusetts. And he's now buried at the National Cemetery on Cape Cod. But I was invited to accompany with the family, his body to. They had a funeral in Manitowoc and then another one in Boston. He died of lung cancer. They think maybe he died because he got lung cancer because of the exhaust fumes on the deck of carriers that are really pungent and acrid. You got combustion from ground support equipment. And they also think that in strafing he might have actually strafed some areas where Agent Orange was being used. Anyhow, he was full long after he passed away. He was only 65 years old when he passed. But they were just wonderful, wonderful friends. When Mike got married, Joe was his best man, and I was a groomsman, and Kathy and I were there for his wedding. Only his father was able to come to the wedding in Pensacola. So we had some wonderful, wonderful times.
Sounds like you impacted their and their family's life just as much as they've impacted yours.
Yes, I think so, yes.
How did you stay in touch with family and friends back home?
Well, that was pretty easy. Usually phone calls or more than anything else, because we were in states. So we had to talk with somebody back home in Evanston or Glenview or wherever it was. We just called and talked with them. So.
And you said that you were married.
Yes.
So was your wife, was she able to travel around with you?
No. Only in Pensacola, a little bit of traveling we did, but when I was in the reserves, no, she was not able to go. This was strictly a training squadron, or an active duty training squadron for the squadron. So we went out to these other places. So.
Okay. What did you do for recreation or when you were off duty?
Well, in Pensacola, Mike and I actually played 12-inch fast-pitch softball, and we played for several teams, and actually Mike and I played that, and then when Mike left to go to the advanced training, I played on a team and pitched on a team that actually went to the Southeastern Atlantic softball tournament, baseball tournaments, 12-inch softball tournament. And if we had won that game, we would have gone to the All-Navy tournament in San Francisco. We got beat 1-0. But that was something else that I had a chance to do when I was in the Navy. So.
Nice. So you were pretty good then.
Yeah, not bad.
Yeah.
I pitched and I pitched pretty well. Thank you. I did pretty well. Thank you.
How did you return home, and what year was it?
We were back home in 1960.
Okay.
And we got a sales job, and that's got me into sales, and I gradually grew. I got into executive sales position over the years. So that was primarily my area of expertise, if you will, in sales.
Okay. How are you received by your family and the community?
May I just ask one other thing?
Yes.
That was something I thought about.
Mm-hmm.
When we were, I was in BA 725 and the maintenance officer for that group, as I had mentioned before. In 1968, 1968, our squadron was voted by the Navy as the top attack squadron in the entire Naval Air Reserve Command.
Wow.
And they had a nice parade and all that for us in April, I think it was, that we had an inspection parade and remarks made. And we thought for sure that probably was going to signal us to be sent over to Vietnam, because they were talking about sending another reserve squadron to Vietnam. And we thought that was, being named the top squadron was the death knell, if you will. But it turns out they selected another squadron from Willow Grove, Pennsylvania, only because it would be easier to get those pilots qualified aboard ship, carrier qualifications. Whereas our squadron, coming out of Glenview, they would have had to have air-to-air refueling in order to. We were flying the A4D Skyhawk, and it only has a range of about 1,100 miles, and we could not go there and come back and not have enough fuel, so we would have to have air-to-air refueling, which meant it would be a lot more costly for the Naval Air Command to do that. So they selected the other squadron because it was easier for them to get qualified aboard ship. That's the only reason we didn't go, from what I understand. So that was the closest we came to getting anywhere near a combat situation. So.
Okay. Well, thank goodness you didn't have to go.
Yes.
face any combat.
Yes, I am very grateful for that,
Yeah.
yes. But the other question that you had asked?
How were you received by your family and the community, and how did you readjust to civilian life?
I think very well. I don't think there was any problems in adjusting to family life. We had one child. At the time, we wound up with 4 more.
Big family.
Something, what was I going to tell you? Our 5th child was born in 1971, and that was after Mike Hoff had passed away. So our 5th child was named Michael Joseph Schwarz, who wound up 3 years old and died of a brain hemorrhage, a cerebral hemorrhage. So we only had him for three years. So his name was Michael Joseph Schwarz. He's named after Mike and Joe. So, part of our story.
Special memory, even if it was only for a few years. Special.
Also in 1968, the Navy established and funded a Naval Air Reserve flight demonstration team. I don't think many people know about this. And similar to the Blue Angels. And we were invited to perform around the Midwest. We couldn't go either east or west because of the limited range of the A-4 Skyhawk. But we flew that airplane, and there were 6 pilots. There were 3 pilots from VA 725 and 3 pilots from VA 727 that were selected to be the pilots for this Naval Air Reserve flight demonstration team. It was called Attack Squadron 8. We were known as the Air Barons. And so we flew mainly around the Midwest. But we were invited to participate in 1968 in the International Air Show in Toronto, Canada. And so we left on a Thursday to go up to Canada, and we flew on Saturdays and Sundays. The air show was on Saturdays and Sundays. The Air Force Thunderbirds were actually the main attraction, and we were kind of like the number 2 attraction there. But it was nice to be able to do this. And I remember this for a couple of reasons. On Sunday, one of our pilots had a bird strike during the performance. During the performance of the air show, had a bird strike, and it knocked out all of his hydraulic systems. The bird crashed into the leading edge of the starboard wing, made a big hole, and the pilot was able to manually put his gear down and land it safely. But when I was actually the maintenance officer, the aircraft maintenance officer for the squadron, selected to do that. But we looked at when the plane landed, we looked at the hole, and it was a huge hole. It was just below you have an air intake for an engine just above that, so it didn't go into the engine, but thank God it only, but it was a huge hole. So our hydraulic people tied the hydraulic system off, and our sheet metal people created a metal plate to put over that big hole, and got it be able to fly. So on Monday when we flew back to Glenview, he flew in slow flight, gear down, with a chase plane all the way from Toronto to Glenview, and the plane got back safely. With all of our planes got back safely. But it was a little scary moment for him. But the Democratic Convention was in 1968, was also going on at the time. And I don't know whether you know much about it, but there was a lot of violence between the protesters and the police in Chicago. So when we left Glenview, everything was kind of normal. When we flew back in on Monday, it was like an armed camp. The jeeps, tents, trucks, everywhere. at Glenview. I always thought we were landing at the wrong place because that was turned out to be the base for the National Guard. That's where they operated from. Because the National Guard was called in to handle the protesters along with the police. So that was a violent time there at the Democratic National Convention. But I just those three events all blended together, and it was quite a weekend.
Wow. And what year was that?
That was 1968.
68. Wow. So, other than the families of your two friends, have you remained in contact or reunited with other fellow veterans?
You know, I know I have, and I can't remember exactly what, but any time that I've run into them, it's been nice to well, first of all, it's been my honor to be to serve my country, but to see the other veterans that I've had a chance to meet and talk with. Actually, my youngest son, Chris, was one of the founders of an organization called Salute, and that was founded in order to help out veterans. And I met quite a few veterans at these get-togethers. They had like a pizza party to raise money in Arlington Heights. But I met quite a few veterans there, and it was wonderful to be able to talk with them. These are more veterans from Vietnam and from Afghanistan and Iraq, and that so many of them have been hurt.
Is he military too? Your
No,
son?
he was not.
Okay.
No. Neither of my sons, Tim, Dan, and Chris, served in the military, but my grandson, Kyle Timothy Schwarz, is a graduate of the U.S. Naval Academy. Graduated in 2009.
Wow.
So I'm very proud of him. He served his 5 years that he had a commitment for. Served aboard the USS Ford, a frigate, USS Barry, a destroyer, and in the last term he served on the aircraft carrier George H.W. Bush. That was the latest of the carriers that has been commissioned.
Wow, very cool.
Yeah, so I'm very proud of him.
Yeah. Are you a member of any veteran
Come in just to return some books, please.
Are you a member of any veterans organizations?
I am not.
What have you done since separating from the military?
Just
Maybe
had
went
a
over a
civilian
few
life.
of them.
Yeah. My family and my career was as a sales executive.
Okay. How did your wartime experience affect your life?
Well, it made me understand what it is to be respectful. I've always thought that if someone could everyone could spend 2 years with their, at least men and women, men primarily could spend 2 years in the military, it would be a very good thing, because I think the men grow up quickly. I'm not sure how to answer that other than
What are some life lessons you learned from the military?
well, I think being in the military has helped me be a better man. I've been I think a better husband, father, grandfather, respectful person, trying to understand people of different cultures. I think it just made me a better person.
Mm-hmm. How has your military service impacted your feelings about war and the military in general?
Well, I know it's a lot different now. I mean, when I was in service, but I feel like I like the idea that Ronald Reagan has, that I think we need to have a very strong military defense. But at the same time, I think we should do everything we can diplomatically to try to resolve differences and avoid war. But at the same time, be prepared, if we have to, that we have a strong defense for our country.
What message would you like to leave for future generations who will hear this interview?
Pray for peace. Again, I would say that everything should be done to try to diplomatically avoid the consequences of war. War doesn't solve much of anything, and a lot of people are sacrificed. And many civilians are usually the result of conflict too. I just use every diplomatic opportunity that you can to resolve differences and just pray for peace.
Is there anything you feel like we haven't discussed or should be added to this interview?
No, I really can't think of anything else. I appreciate the opportunity to present this story, if you will, especially the story about Joe McDermott and Michael Hoff and his being the silhouette on the POW flag. I'm grateful for that, and I appreciate what you have done and your group has done for us to be able to do this, all the veterans to be able to do this.
We so appreciate you coming in, and thank you for telling us that story, and thank you especially for your service.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.